Welcome, theorists, to another portion of the melody primer I have provided for you. This section only makes sense if you have watched the first one, so please go ahead and do so, and then come back and view this section as well. Here we are going to talk about how to do this graph analysis, or the application of Schenkerian analysis that you have been reading about, studying about, and maybe even wondering about what all this is supposed to mean. Let me introduce to you a simplified version of this reduction analysis, which this is, reducing melody and the song into a shorter form, by way of a short example that will set you up, hopefully, to be successful in the assignments that you will be doing shortly. We're talking about a reduction that has three perspectives. It's the foreground, the middle ground, which I will skip, and then the background of an analysis. And each of those levels is a more reduced or more condensed version of the original. And one thing you have to know by now, or understand, is that this type of analysis is melody driven. It considers the harmonic context, of course, but its primary focus is on the melody. Let's begin with the foreground. The foreground is something that has no bar lines per se, but you will see dashed or dotted bar lines that indicate phrases. We also have no note length, even though we use the version of the notation that we're used to, but we will see that these are indicating the type of tone or the type of pitch. The structural pitch will have a stem and a bar. The non-structural pitch will not have a stem, and the sub-pitches will not have a stem and are in parentheses. Structural pitches that have a bar are indicating the melody. There are structural pitches without the bar or the beam that beams them together. Those are structural pitches that come from a harmonic context. So after this introduction of what the foreground basically is and is not, I want to introduce you to the process of analysis that you have to go through, and it builds on other forms of analysis that we have done so far. So the harmonic analysis should be quite familiar, where we look at all the chords, the harmonic contexts, introducing also the harmonic areas, and I will get to that in a second, and also identifying the non-chord tones, which is quite essential at this point. Then we do a form analysis, where we look at phrases, song forms, antecedent, consequences, constellations, and all these, because they will help us to identify the sections that get reduced. And finally, we look at the melody, where we identify the structural and the non-structural tones and the sub-pitches. And on this level, it becomes quite subjective, in a meaning that without listening to the piece and understanding how it flows and what gets emphasized in the melody, this last part will become quite a challenge, or more an academic than an experiential analysis, which this is supposed to be. Let's look at a piece of music which comes from the song cycle or of Dichterliebe from Schumann, and it's the second piece in the cycle, and its name is Aus meinen Tränen sprießen. So I first looked at the first phrase and did a harmonic analysis, as you can see below, and I also indicated in yellow the areas. So the first two bars are in the area of 1, this bar 3 and 4 are in the area of 5. The form is established quite quickly, where I see this phrase with two sub-phrases kind of happening, ending on a half cadence with a 1 to 5 7 at the end. So this should be no bother so far. More interestingly now is to identify the non-chord tones, which we have quite a few here. We have an upper neighbor in the melody, and then a series of changing tones or a neighboring group. Then also in the left hand we see pathing tones maybe going through -6 on the way down from the 1 to the 4, and then we see an escape tone in measure 3 and another escape tone in the same kind of a figure in measure 4. Finally, we have to look at the structural notes, which cannot be non-chord tones, so we eliminated those tones from the possibility of becoming structural notes. We are sometimes quick to identify the highest or the lowest note or some emphasized note that is stressed, comes on the strong beat to be a structural note. But if we really understand the song and listen to it, those might not be the ones that actually make up the structure of the piece. As we have here in the second measure on Sprießen, that D is an upper neighbor on the melody, and so it's most likely it's not a structural note. And so here is my solution for you. We start in the third scale degree, go on Blühende to a second scale degree, and maybe, because it's in the piano right hand, to a first scale degree at the end. And now the graphing starts. I start here with the outline of the melodic structural notes that we have here. Each melodic structural note has a harmonic context, and so we add that as well. In the next step, I am reducing the rest of the notes into non-structural and sub-pitches. And my solution would look like this. You can see the sub-pitches being in parentheses, the non-structural pitches being without a stem, and those two who are structural but in a harmonic context with the stem facing down. If this was a little bit too fast for you, I would encourage you to go to the previous screen and look at the melody and switch back and forth to see how this fits together. So for review, I have the structural pitches here, and there, even though I'm not very convinced about the last one because it doesn't happen in the sung melody, but we'll get to that later. Then we have the non-structural pitches, which I have identified some here. And in a final step, we look at the sub-pitches here. We shouldn't forget to indicate also the end of the phrase. So if we do the next section, it comes after a dashed bar line. To complete the foreground, I include the harmonic analysis below, but you can see that some of them are in parentheses. These are harmonies that happen on non-structural notes and are not in the structural pitches. So you can see basically we are in the 1 area and then we are in the 5 area, excluding all the others. And this is how the foreground would look for the first 4 measures of this piece. The background is basically a reduction of my foreground, where I only look at the structural and non-structural notes from the melody. And it looks like something like this, where we have the 3 structural notes and then the 2 non-structural pitches in between, which gives us this harmonic context. And alternatively, one could argue that the 5/7 and the scaling degree of 1, since it does not work together harmonically, are actually not part of the structure. So what we have here is basically a third scale degree going to a second scale degree through a set of two non-structural nodes. And so we have 3, 2, that is the background of the first section. I hope this helped you to get another perspective or another way of explaining this entire process, and good luck with your analyses. Please contact me and ask questions if there are any further information I might be able to help you with, and grace and peace.